Just for those of you who were less than satisfied with your grade, the bottom line is, despite the fact that I made verbal reminders, I'm pretty confident. Subsequent to reading one of your papers that you turned in, I said, hey, this student really missed all of these concepts. You had to introduce a theory and 4 concepts from the book. And most of you did not read past and you just stopped at the one theory, and that was a lot of points. So that is what happened there. So nobody failed, but my advice to you is when we work on the final, follow the directions in their entirety, ask a lot of questions. Speaking of the final, unless they're here somewhere, somehow all of the index cards with your Disney movie did not make it into any of my things by the time I got to my office from here the other day. So I just need everybody to jot down which movie you are assigned to and get that to me. And when we meet on Monday, I'll talk about where we are going with that. So, any questions based on what I just said?
I did it so early. I wasn't just sure.
And that does happen, right? Okay, so quietly write out your little whatever topic so that we can get started. Right. You weren't here. Anybody who wasn't here, get with me Monday. Because I have a class right after this, or find me later on this afternoon or tomorrow. Okay, so as promised, we have Kim Dutremaine here from Cottonwood Clinical Services to share with us about what we've been studying in Chapter 7 and 8, mental health disorders and suicide. I did compile all of the questions that you submitted to me. Kim has those. She's taken a look at those. That doesn't mean that you can't ask questions as she is sharing. She's got tons of experience. So thank you for being here.
So my name is Kim Dutremaine. I'm a clinical director at Cottonwood Clinical Services. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug abuse counselor, and I'm a substance abuse professional. And I've worked in the field for probably 20 years. And I got into this field as a person in recovery. So I'm a recovering drug addict. I'm a convicted felon. And I have one of those histories, I guess, that kind of sways into the human service field. When I got into recovery, I decided, oh, that looks like something that I would like to do. And when I started and went to school, here I am. So I think you guys are talking about suicide and wanting to know information. A lot of the questions on here were suicide related. And Dawn and I were talking before. There's a lot of questions about statistics, and I don't necessarily have statistics. I run a large agency, and I know what we see in our agency. So I can tell you numbers like that, but I can't say 22% of people this age, I don't know that stuff. And I don't know the statistics for San Juan County. So I do know that at Cottonwood, we have a juvenile program. So we have a building that has nothing but juveniles, and then we have an adult program. And at any given time, we probably have 500 clients. From Monday of last week until yesterday, we did 50 intakes. We had 50 people present needing an assessment so that they could start services. So if you add that up, and that's like 10 a day, every day, people needing services. Out of those 50 intakes, probably, well, I know for a fact, out of the 50, we had 5 who answered, have you been suicidal in the past 7 days? So whenever we have a client that comes in, we have a sheet in the front that has specific questions about suicide. Have you attempted suicide in the past 7 days? Have you had thoughts of suicide in the past 7 days? And the reason for that is our intake people, they're clerical. And so they don't know, does this person need to be seen right now? Can I set them? Our assessments are like 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out. Do I schedule them for 3 weeks from now? They don't know. So we came up with a way to pre-screen for that so that we can get people seen quicker who are in crisis. So what happens is, of the 5 that answered yes to that question, what we do is we get a counselor to come talk to them right then and there. And so then we do like a quick evaluation. Is this imminent? Do you need to go to the ER? Do you need us to call emergency services for you? What's really happening? So 9 times out of 10, when we meet with one of those people, they'll say, well, yeah, I've thought about it, but I would never do that. Or, well, yeah, everybody thinks about that, don't they? These are the kind of, and you want to say, no, I don't think I've ever thought about that, but you don't say it out loud. So we kind of determine what is the urgency? Is this somebody who needs to be seen right now? And do we need to call somebody? Probably out of the 5, one of those was a true emergency. We scheduled them the next day. We usually have them sign a no harm contract saying that they agree not to harm themselves. If they do feel like it's going to get worse or they are going to do something, they have a crisis line number. I should have brought that. You guys know the crisis number? What to do for suicide?
They just did a little bit of research, and so they have found some different hotlines.
Let me tell you which one it is. 7474 at the end. It's 1-888 something 7474. Anyway, I should have brought it because you can text. They don't even have to call anymore. You can text because a lot of people don't want to call. So now they've made the crisis number so you can text, and people feel comfortable doing that. So one of those was an emergency. I have been the clinical director at Cottonwood for almost 9 years. And in that 9 years, we've probably only had to call emergency services twice, where somebody was really in crisis, suicidal, saying, I can't leave here because I'm going to harm myself. And so we call, and usually an ambulance comes and they agree to go and they will take them to the hospital. If they have somebody with them, a lot of times we'll say, are you willing to take them to ER? And they'll say yes, and we make them sign an agreement that says, we talked to you about this is where they're going, and this is the need. A lot of times people will refuse. They don't want you to call, they don't want to go. They'll say, yes, I feel like harming myself, I just want to end it, but no, I'm not going to go, and you're not going to make me go. And in the state of New Mexico, we cannot send someone against their will. So it's a matter of being really gentle, kind of encouraging them to think of other options, giving them some skills, having them sign a no harm contract, asking if there's somebody that we can talk to just let the other person know, hey, this guy's really in crisis. Can you keep an eye on him? Can you stay with him today? Those kind of things. So we do see it a lot. With the juvenile clients, I just did one yesterday that it's really hard to determine, is this for real? Is this a cry for help? Or are you just playing everybody because you want what you want? So, and I know that sounds harsh, but it's the reality. So yesterday I had a girl, she's 15, just turned 15. No, just turned 14. We see clients 13 and up. So she just turned 14. She came in with her mother. The mother was, just distraught, saying that this girl had tried to commit suicide at 8. She has been to UNM Psychiatric Hospital twice for 7-day stays. She's done counseling in the past, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the last couple of weeks, she's talked about stepping out in front of a car. She has had complete and total meltdowns, and the mother's just really concerned. So mom brings her in. I bring the mom in. She's saying all of her concerns. The child's sitting there. Mom leaves the room. So child starts telling me what's really going on, because one of the incidences was, I found her in the park. She was really intoxicated, and she said, I'm tired of all this shit. Excuse my language, but that's what she said. And so when I get to talking to her, the reality of the situation is she has found out that when she threatens suicide, everybody backs off. And so she was drunk. She was at a park. She wanted to stay out longer than was allowed. So when she got caught at the park, she reverted back to what she knows best. And so mom gets upset. She gets worried. The issue of you're out past curfew and you're not doing what you're supposed to do got swept under the rug. And she, all of a sudden, the focus is on her, and she gets a special attention. She gets checked out of school so she can go to this assessment, all of this stuff. Right? So I'm sitting there. This session's only an hour. We're 30 minutes in, and I've already realized, oh, all right, so here we are. And so I'm looking at her, and I said, so you just really want to do what you want to do, and that's what this is, right? Well, sometimes, so then she starts playing that, oh, this lady knows, so I better start talking something else. And all the while you have to play the balance of, this is what I think it is, but is there some level of, sincerity to the cry for help? She did have 2 7-day stays at UNM. There are underlying things. So is it a little bit of both? I don't know. So it's something that's going to be an ongoing, and in my case note, I think that here's part of what's happening. And then the other part is, is there really suicidal ideation? I have no doubt that she's probably depressed. I have no doubt that she's got emotional dysregulation and mood problems, but to what level and what degree and what's real and what's not real. So we see a lot of adolescents who are developing personality disorder, and so everything is chaotic. The lies are just like ridiculously unbelievable. We had 2 girls in our intensive outpatient program, which is a drug alcohol intensive program. It's the step before residential treatment. Both of them on the same day are pregnant. Everything is always drama, right? With these 2 girls, it is drama. They, for a week, have been talking about these pregnancies, and the mom, one of them had an ultrasound picture, and the mom's taking them to the doctor, and here's what's happening. These huge elaborate stories. And finally, I told the counselors, I'm like, why don't you guys go get some pregnancy tests and let's find out what's really going on here, because I have a feeling this is part of the drama. And sure enough, neither one are pregnant, and it really was just to keep everything stirred up and the topic off of what it should be. I mean, they had their parents involved, they had pictures, all of it. They aren't even pregnant. They never went there. So clinically, since we're talking about mental health, this is developing borderline personality. And it's all part of the diagnosis that we really need to be addressing. And so the only reason for the pregnancy test is, okay, I need some hard ammunition so that I can really confront your behavior, so that we can talk about this behavior and get away from the crazy stuff that's going on in there. So if you work in a mental health agency, there's always something going on at any given time. It's messy. And it's kind of funny because we have a new building for our adolescents, and it's next door to an attorney's office. So we've been there since May, probably. Probably about 4 times the attorneys had to come over and go, those kids, they're throwing rocks out in the street. If that's the worst thing that they're doing, I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? And so it's like people's perception. These are people who are really ill and need some significant help, but the perception is oh my gosh, they are out of control over there. And can you see what goes on? And when you have, 20 adolescent kids who have severe mental health and drug addiction, all in the same building, all at the same time, it's kind of crazy. And if you were just Joe off the street and you came walking in and kind of saw what was going on and listened to, it probably would freak you out. You'd be like, holy cow, what's happening here? It's that whole thing of you got to meet your client where they're at. So we can't expect kids who are living in shelters because their drug addicted parents are off somewhere. They've been selling their kids for drugs. These kids have their own drug addiction problems. They're budding borderline, and they come into the building and we expect them to act like our 15-year-old kids. No, they do not. I have probation officers and people who come in and they're like, this is just unacceptable behavior. And that language is, and I'm going, these are not your children. These are children who come from a whole totally different background, and we're trying to get them there to where they're at this place where they're appropriate and they're able to express themselves in a different way, but they're not there yet. So we're working on it. and yeah, we are an agency and we live next door to neighbors and they're freaked out and stuff. And same with our adult clients, I guess, same thing applies. So suicide and depression. Suicide is a funny thing. I've had at least 2 clients commit suicide. One of them was my client for 3.5 years. He was a person in recovery. He had been sober for maybe 24 years. He was bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder and medicated sometimes and not medicated at other times, and which is typical with bipolar. Bipolar people, they start taking medication, they feel better, they quit taking medication, they get manic, then the manic episode lasts for a long period of time, and then something major happens, and so then I gotta go get some medication, and then we start the cycle all over again.
Kim, can I interject?
Yes.
So tell them a little bit about what manic would look like.
Okay. Well, it's different for all people, but classic mania is rapid thoughts, not being able to sleep, hyper-focused on something. So this is your artist, your songwriter, your whoever that stays up all night and they're writing, or they're drawing, and they're so onto this thing, and it could be days in a row that they're doing this, and everything is just super fast, and I guess fast and hyper-focused is you can see it in their eyes even. It is intense. Everything is intense. And so sometimes when someone will walk in the office and you can just see it, and you're like, oh, there we go, we're in a manic episode. And the people that are with them are like, I don't know what's going on, and I'm not sure what to do here. So that's mania. And then there's hypomania. So hypomania is the little bit, it's like this. So I get a little bit of rapid thinking, and I'm a little intense, and my sleep is a little bit dysregulated, and those kind of things. So you can be bipolar 1, bipolar 2. Bipolar 1 is extreme. This is Britney Spears shaving her head. Bipolar 2 is that person that just gets moody and snaps at you and does those kind of things. And mania a lot of times comes with anger and being really irritated and agitated during that time. So people find themselves kind of like an alcoholic blackout where they have gone for 3 or 4 days and they've just been on a manic run and they've spent a lot of money. Maybe they went gambling for 4 days. They come out of it and they're like, man, I don't even know what I did, why I was there. I'm not sure why that happened. A lot of times sex is involved, just real inappropriate behavior. So, so this guy, bipolar, would have manic episodes, those kind of things. And we had been working, bipolar is a form of depression, in case we're not aware. There's different levels of depression. So you have dysthymia that's real low, major depressive disorder, it can be mild, moderate, severe. Then you have bipolar disorder. And if you're bipolar disorder, we wipe all the rest of them away. To the side. So this guy, we had been working on skills. We did EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing for post-traumatic stress symptoms, which come along with depression. We worked on a lot of stuff. And so I had a session with him that day. It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And there was no indication to me, not one that I would have never guessed in a million years. Had our session at probably 7 o'clock that night. He shot himself in the heart. You know, and I would have never known. And so, are there indicators? Yes. Sometimes there are. Sometimes there aren't. My experience is that it's half and half. Some people talk about it all the time and end up completing suicide. Some people never mention it and end up completing suicide. One of the questions was, who complete suicide more often, men or women? And I don't know the answer to that. That's kind of seems mixed as well. I know for San Juan County and for our clients, our clients are all pretty much interconnected. And so when somebody does commit suicide, we hear about it. And I think more times than not, it's an adolescent or a young person. So somebody between 13 and 22, probably. It seems to be that way. And I don't know if it comes in waves, and then we'll have a wave of adults who complete. I'm not sure. Whenever you assess an adolescent and you ask them, we ask questions about, have you ever had thoughts of suicide? What are those like? Do you have any family members who have been diagnosed with depression? That's another indicator. Do you have any friends that have attempted or completed suicide? And the answer is typically yes. And so that's pretty startling that they know someone. The majority of the kids know someone, and most of the time it's a close friend that they know, or a family member. So it is pretty prevalent, and a lot of our kids and adults, they come in with grief that results in depression. And a lot of times that grief comes from death of a friend or a family member. And a lot of times it's a suicide death. So it's a pretty big issue in San Juan County. One of these questions on here, it says, does your profession affect your personal life? If so, in what way? For me, I've been doing it for a really long time. And I'm really good at, I leave my work at work. And I can turn that switch off and walk out the door and not even think about it again. So unless, you have a client you worked with for 3 years nonstop, and so then that one, it kind of gets you and you're just like, man, but then you have to remind yourself, this is the profession that I've chosen. This is the clients that we work with. everybody has supervision. So even though my licensure is independent and I don't need supervision, I have supervision. I have somebody to bounce things off of, somebody to talk to about, gosh, that one really got me. I have other professionals in the community that they'll call me and be like, I'm dying over here. I don't even know how to handle this because this is bothering me more than I thought it was going to. And it's that way. You can be trucking along just fine, and we have so much stuff all day, every day. And I hate to say it, but it's kind of like you become immune to it. It's not as emotional, which is probably a good thing. If you're a really emotional person and those things affect you deeply, you got to figure out how to separate that, or you're not going to survive. You can be going along just fine, and then something out of the blue will really bother you. And then you got to figure out, well, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to take care of that? So, and I'm sure you guys have heard it a million times, self-care is really, really important. You really need to be able to take care of yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually, because if not, this profession will chew you up, spit you out. I see a lot of professionals burn out. They're not effective anymore. They don't practice self-care. Then they end up quitting. Or you can just see it on them. I had a meeting yesterday, and there was another professional from the community, and she was there, and bless her heart, man, she just looked exhausted, wore out, over it. And I wanted to say, you need to take a break or something, because this is not a good, but it wasn't my place to say that.
But Kim, so we've had, maybe not in here, in the criminal justice class, we had an officer come in and he was saying, you really need to change it up. Not necessarily leave the department, but work with a different part of the department.
Yep.
How long, you've been doing this for 2 decades. Do you change it up? Do you work with different clients? Do you go back and forth between adults? Like, what do you recommend to somebody? What would you have said to that woman had you felt comfortable saying something to her?
I would have said, you need to pull yourself out of direct service and do something else. Like, that's true. So I supervise a lot of clinicians, and we do that. So if somebody's been doing intensive outpatient is 3 hours a day, 3 days a week. You got the same group, they're there for 16 weeks, and it's intense. And so when you've done that for a year or 2 years, and you step out of that, and then you're doing individual session back to back to back to back all day long, and then you have to get out of that and do something else. And so we are fortunate that we have adolescents, which the majority of people step in that adolescent, they're like, oh yeah, I want to work with kids. 3 days. And they're like, ain't happening. Get me out of here. I'm not going to do it. But we have that ability where they can do that. I like to get people in the more administrative end. Help me work on a RFP, a request for proposal. Help me figure out policy and procedure. Let's work on these kind of administrative things. Let's go out in the community and meet with probation officers and the hospitals and other mental health agencies. Let's do other stuff. Let's do outpatient instead of intensive outpatient for a while. Let's do more mental health stuff. It's all different. We had one counselor who that happened. He was like, I can't do this anymore. I think I need out of here. So he left and he went to work for one of the MCOs, the managed care organizations like Molina Presbyterian. They manage Medicaid. So they have snatched up a bunch of the independently licensed clinicians to be what's called care coordinators. So care coordinators, they help consumers have access to services, things like that. So he decided, I'm going to do that. That sounds relaxing. You know. After about 4 months, he was like, this is driving me crazy. I sit around in my pajamas all morning. I don't do anything. This is a waste of the state's money. I can't believe I'm doing this. You know, and it's like, yeah, you have a really good skill. And then that's the other thing, you know, if you have that ability to engage people in need, then that's what you need to do, because it's either you have it or you don't have it. So eventually he ended up coming back, and so that's what we do with him. Okay, so let's do supervision now. We'll have you supervise these other newer clinicians. So now we'll take you out of supervision, and we'll have you still do supervision, but now we're going to have you do anger management stuff. Let's do domestic violence offender instead. Now let's go back to addicts. Maybe teach a class at the college. Just different kind of things, because when you walk into, I know for a counselor, which human service, there's a million things, but for a counselor, when you walk in, from 9 to 10, I see a client. 9:55, I walk out, I set the file down, the next client's there, I walk back in. 10 to 10:55. I just heard about his suicidal manic day. I walk out, hand a file, other one comes in. Now I'm doing 55 more minutes. I walk out, I walk in. 8 hours of that. Every day, all day. It's like, even my family, they don't get it. They'll try to call me. Well, I can't answer my phone. I'm in a session. Well, can you go to lunch? Not really, because I only have like 45 minutes, and then I got to be back because there's somebody sitting there. I cannot be late. So it's rigid, because there are people sitting there waiting on you to be there. And you can only do that for so long before you're just like, I need to go to lunch. You know, I need to go pay a bill, something. I gotta get out of here. So it's really managing your time and being able to ask for what you need. I don't know, I get busy. So if my clinicians don't come to me and go, I'm dying over here, you need to help me, then I don't know, and I can't help them. So being able to advocate for yourself. We advocate for clients, but we need to advocate for self and what we need. I've worked in a lot of different places. So I've worked in residential treatment, outpatient treatment, children, youth, and families protective service. I was a supervisor for them. I was a statewide consultant for them. I've been an administrator. I've written grants. So I'm able to, luckily since I'm the boss, I get to go, I don't want to do that anymore. Push it off to someone else. So you got to be able to ask for what you need. That's the bottom line to the whole thing. Do mix it up, because it will drive you crazy.
I got a question for you. Do you believe that self-closure is good for a clinician to provide that to their clients when they start working with them, or in general, just as you're working with the clients and getting to know them, to use that self-closure towards the client to let them know that you have been in a similar situation? Do you think that's wise, or do you think that you should try to hold back as much as possible?
I would say check your motive. What are you doing it for? Most of the time, I don't disclose. I only disclose if I get to a place where I'm having an impasse and we're not able to move forward. And so then my motive is I'm doing this for the benefit of the client, because the client's struggling with, I work in addictions. So the number one thing you hear, well, if you're not an addict, how can you help an addict? Because you don't know. Well, it's a bunch of malarkey. A lot of people can help addicts who aren't addicts and be just fine. But they have it in their mind that if you're going to help me, you need to have been where I've been. Well, I'm sorry. I deal with people that have PTSD, and I've never had PTSD. I deal with depression. I've never had depression. I've had drug addiction. So, yeah, I can relate in that way. I tell my new clinicians, if they're in recovery, to not disclose for a year. And I say that because I don't want them relying on that. I want them to use their skills. And a lot of times new clinicians, what they do is they want to rely on, oh, I got you, man. I know, because I've been there, and here's what. Self-disclosure can eat you alive if you don't know when to stop, because they will use it against you in whatever way, shape, or form. Unless you're seasoned and been doing it long enough to know how to deal with that, right? So it's one of those tricky things, you know. I think after you've been working with a client for a while and you know their stability and stuff, and then I'm real specific in what I share. We have clients who will hunt you down. They're going to find your house. They're going to know where your kids go to school. And if they want to harm you, they will. And I mean, I hate to put it that way, but it is that way. That's why they say you don't put your family photos in your office. I deal with sex offenders and violent criminals. And I'm not going to open up my personal information to them. We don't even allow our front desk people to be friends with people on Facebook who are clients. We just don't go there. There is a line. And they're like, well, we're not clinicians. We're not bound to that. I don't care. The clients come in with cupcakes. Oh, I brought these. Why didn't they just bring you cupcakes? They brought you cupcakes because they eventually want you to do something for them. Oh, I know I have that UA today, but do you think we could just like do it tomorrow? Because I've been bringing you cupcakes for 3 months now. You're my buddy, right? You're my friend. No, I'm not your friend. And because it will, and you know, and it sounds cynical, and maybe it wouldn't end there, but my experience is it'll end there. Somebody wants something eventually. They want to be your friend. And if I start self-disclosing, now you're my friend. You're not my clinician. It blurs the line a little bit. So wait.
That's really good.
Okay. That is a question that gets asked all the time. You know, can I share? Can I disclose? And a lot of times it kind of comes out anyway, especially like for addiction counselors when they're talking about recovery. It's hard not to talk about things that they know, and the reason that they know it is because they're in recovery. Or if you're being treated for bipolar disorder and you take medication, it's hard not to talk about the experience on that medication because you know it to the client. So you got to talk in general, like it's not about you. Let's see. What do you guys want to hear about other than suicide, depression, all that depressing stuff? Schizophrenia. What do you want to know about schizophrenia?
Well, actually, too, I had a different question about the bipolar disorder. You said that bipolar 1 is just more extreme, and bipolar 2 seems to have like a high volume. Do bipolar 2 people get psychosis too? Like, can they get somatic? If they get psychosis?
They can. Yes, there can be psychosis with bipolar 2. Psychosis is delusions, hallucinations, audio, visual, hearing voices, that kind of thing. It can come about for a lot of different reasons. And so, you know, people get hung up on diagnoses like, oh my gosh, well now they have these voices, so is it this or is it this? Or it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is there's a symptom that needs to be treated. And this symptom is psychosis. Is it because of schizophrenia? I don't know. Is it because of bipolar? I'm not sure. Is it for insurance purposes? You got to have a diagnosis on there that you're treating. But for the other part of it, it's mostly what skills am I going to teach, or what medication are we going to recommend? But yes, psychosis can come bipolar 2.
And then, with schizophrenia, is that something that you take them some more all the time, or do they kind of go up and down like bipolar, where they might be fine off it for a little while or something?
It's a perception of fine, right? So I'm going to stop taking my medication because I think I'm fine, but everybody else is going, you're not fine, you need to be on your medication. So that is kind of the thing. So once bipolar, always bipolar. If you are a true bipolar, you're not going to treat it and it be gone. Once schizophrenic, always schizophrenic. It is an untreatable mental health disorder. Whereas other things are treatable. Depression is treatable, post-traumatic stress is treatable, personality disorders are treatable. So schizophrenia is a lifelong needing to be treated disorder. And there's a lot of different theories. Does it need to be psychotropic medication? Can it be an alternative medication? Same thing with bipolar. There are alternatives to medication. I'm not a fan of psychotropic medications. I think they're way overused. I think sometimes they cause more problems than they do. Psychotropic medication is a medication that treats a psychological disorder. So it's going to have a psychological effect on mood, thought process, things like that.
Kind of like
Anti-
your mind down.
Well, it depends. Antidepressant, antipsychotic, so maybe it's just going to turn the voices off. And, you know, that's a tough thing, too, to evaluate, just like the suicidal ideation. You know, we're evaluating that, and we're going, what is that? How serious? So same thing with psychosis. It's like a lot of depression comes with hearing voices. And you have to discern, well, what kind of voice is it? Is this a command hallucination, or is this voice telling you to go do something? Is it a derogatory hallucination? Is it somebody telling you you're a dirty dog, worthless, loser? Is it you're just hearing things? So here, I have a client right now. You can see him today. His is drug-induced psychosis. So this doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to some people. It's strange. Anyway, so you know those people that do meth, and during the meth intoxication, they see things, they hear things, and then as soon as they're done using meth, then it's gone and they don't have it ever again. Some people have that during the time that they're intoxicated, and then they quit using, and now we're 8 months later and it's still happening. So I have this guy right now that, you know, and I'm trying to go, well, what kind of hallucinations are these? Is somebody talking to you? He goes, no, I can hear the kids at the park, and the park is 3 blocks down there, and it's driving me insane. And I can hear that truck coming, and it's way down there. I shouldn't be able to hear that truck coming. And I can hear the neighbors, and I can't sleep because I hear the neighbors, and right? So his is not a command hallucination. It's not a derogatory. It's not any of those things. It really is a condition of there were too many neurotransmitters created because of the stimulant drug, and everything's firing way faster than it should. And, you know, can he take medication to slow that down and help him until his body naturally does for him what it needs? Yes. And that's what I told him. I'm like, you know, you can get an antipsychotic and it will be helpful. At least it won't be driving you crazy until such a time that your brain repairs itself.
But Kim, that's a newer thing, it seems, or at least we're hearing about it more, and it's generally the meth-induced psychosis. So how long are we, is it too new? Could you guess? It will be 2 years maybe before you're thinking.
It can be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. So here's what happens. Then if you're a stimulant user, whether it's meth, cocaine, whatever, the brain creates more neural pathways than necessary. So it's like everything's rapid firing. And in that process, the body quits producing neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and those things that generally make you feel good, and happy, and all right with the world. It stops producing all of that. So then you take the drug away, because the drug is hitting those receptor sites and making you feel good and making you feel like everything's okay with the world. Then you quit taking it. Then you feel really, really bad. Bad, like depressed bad. I'm depressed because nothing's hitting the receptor site. There is no dopamine or serotonin being produced by my body. And my body's not going to start producing it for another 18 to 24 months. And so people in early recovery have a really hard time because they have all those symptoms of depression because they're not getting the neurotransmitters. They have a hard time thinking clearly. They're easily distracted. They're easily agitated. They're sad, no motivation, all of that stuff. So what do? Do you wait? Or do you get an antidepressant? Do you start exercising? Because exercising boosts serotonin, dopamine, right? There's all those different things, but General Joe, like the mom, is going, well, if you would just quit using, your life would be better and everything would be great. And so the addict goes, okay, I'll quit using that. And then it gets worse and everything's bad and I can't even function and I don't know how to do anything and I feel better when I'm using. And these are the conversations that are going on in the addict's mind. And so they use, and then everybody's like, what are you doing? Why did you do that? Because I feel like crap and I can't, and I got these voices. I can hear the kids at the park down there that's driving me crazy. And the only way I can shut it off is if I drink a pint and then I'm good. Why can't you just stay sober? It's that kind of thing. So psychosis, schizophrenics, lifelong. Treatment is pharmacology, it's medication. Really, there are no skills to be taught other than to know what is real and what is not real, and to learn how to be okay with what's going on up here. So when you have schizophrenic clients, you can tell when you're talking to them that sometimes they're not listening to you, they're listening to something else. And so that that's probably what's really going on. And you need to have those conversations with them. So how loud is it? How intense is it? What can we do to push that down?
I have another question. Why is statistics show that recovery is 13 to 1? Why hasn't it changed in the last 10 years? Why are we still at the same statistics showing that only 1 out of 13 is recovery? What can we do to change that? I mean, we give them all the tools, we know that, but things run into their, things run, I mean, they do well when they're in recovery, but once they leave that, is there a different approach maybe that they could take to see that recovery increase of maybe 13 to 2, 13 to 3? Is it going to ever get better, or is it always going to stay the same?
So 1936, Alcoholics Anonymous wrote in their big book that alcoholism is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And it still is. And so my opinion is either you make the decision or you don't. Period. I don't care what kind of recovery you get, what kind of treatment, it's that engagement. Am I going to finally click with somebody who helps me make that decision on a daily basis for myself? I think it's about the people, not the matrix model or the seeking safety model or the 7 challenges model or the, I don't think it is. I think it is who's going to inspire me to help me make that decision for myself? Because it is a decision I have to make for myself on a daily basis. And if I can talk to somebody who can say, oh yeah, that's natural to be that depressed when you're early in recovery. All you got to do today is just don't drink or use no matter what. And all those kooky little sayings that you hear in AA and NA and all of that stuff, that's what it's about. You just don't do it, period. And I mean, we do all this scientific stuff and we have all these statistics and we learn all these things, and the bottom line is you just make a decision. I'm going to be in recovery and that's what I'm going to do. Let me ask.
Okay.
I have two questions. The first one is in our book. It talks about a study that they did, or one of the many, and it says for race and ethnicity that they have more of a higher rate in minorities. Like in the book. And
Who has a higher rate?
It says that minorities have higher rates of psychiatric distress among American Blacks, Hispanics, and Asians than whites.
Uh-huh.
Is that true within the area, at least with your clients that you have?
No.
Or is it no discrimination? It's just all around?
If you walk into our groups, I would say the majority is white. People ask me this question all the time. So is it mostly Native? No, it's mostly white. Kids in foster care, they're white. So, I mean, maybe across the country, but not in San Juan County. And then I would have to say that, it's nature and nurture, right? So if I live in a economically depressed area with high addiction rates anyway, so if I live in Chicago and I'm not getting a very good education and I don't have parents, I don't think it's going to matter if I'm white, brown, black. I'm probably going to have a higher rate of mental health problems. So I don't know necessarily if I think a lot of it is socioeconomic, because you can take the same brown person and put them in a higher. Have you guys seen that thing on Facebook that talks about privilege? And it's the race. And so everybody starts in the same place, and it says, okay, so now if you have two parents, take 2 steps forward. If you were able to go to a private school, take 2 steps forward. So they talk about everything but color. And the people who are farther ahead have privileges. They have all these privileges. And it has really nothing to do with race. It has to do with what have you been afforded in your life. So I kind of think it's the same thing with mental health. Because yes, it is hereditary. Yes, it can go down the line, but I don't know. We see everybody, and I think we have more white people than anything.
Okay. And you hit on the second question. I was just going to ask, but it also stated that it was more higher in urban areas than rural areas, and I think that was kind of just like a social distress. Or we have more stress like in urban areas than we would out on the outskirts.
Well, we live where? On the largest Indian reservation in the United States. So we are a rural area that has a lot of distress, right? So I think our rates are higher. And then we have like the job situation where lots of companies are moving out and we don't have oil field. And when the community is doing better, our numbers are less at our agency. And when things are bad, like right now, it's crazy town. Like everybody is in there. And it's things like, lack of job and having to move from house to house because you can't afford to pay your rent. And I mean, all of those things kind of combine together, and people try to do the best that they can, and they end up in bad situations a lot of times, or just struggling. No, I think the biggest thing that we see, since we do adolescent services and adult services, is zero life skills. the parents didn't have any life skills, so they didn't teach it to the children. So just the basic, take a shower every day kind of thing is not there, and why it's important to do that. And so as therapists, even though we're dealing with mental health, which not taking a shower is part of mental health, but we have to do that kind of stuff.
When you were talking about EMDR earlier, one of the questions on here is what type of therapy is most effective when treating mental illness? What types of mental health disorders is EMDR appropriate for?
So EMDR is primarily post-traumatic stress. Do you guys know what EMDR is? The eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It is it's the treatment of choice for combat veterans, people returning from war, because it's quick. It can be done without talking. What it does is it takes, so it's for trauma. Let's just say trauma. So whenever a person experiences trauma, those memories don't get stored in long-term memory like they should. They stay in short-term memory. And if I have a bunch of memories floating around in my short-term memory, it affects my ability to focus on what I need to focus on right now. It affects my body and how I'm feeling, like I might be anxious and on edge at all times because that traumatic memory, your body has memory just like your brain does. So I'm in a constant state of heightened arousal because my memory's not in the right place. And so these persons are not sleeping, they have anxiety disorders, they're struggling with panic attacks, nightmares are intense, being able to really focus on my job might be impaired. So, and then you add trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. So I'm a child, I've witnessed domestic violence from 0 to 10. Then my dad moved out, and me and my mom, we're having to go from house to house to house with all these people. Now I'm sexually abused at this other house. So I've got the DV trauma. Now I have sexual abuse trauma. Now my best friend committed suicide trauma. Now my dad died of an overdose trauma, and I'm 17. So these are the kids that we see. So all of this stuff is floating around. It's not in long-term memory where it belongs. They can't look at you and start talking about all of this stuff in a, let's have a conversation about it because it's too emotionally intense, right? So the strategy is to move the short-term memory to the long-term memory so that it's not affecting the body in the way that it being in the short-term memory does. The memory never goes away. You're always going to remember it. Is it going to be vivid and intrusive? No. Am I going to be standing here and all of a sudden, boom, I'm back in my auto accident that I was in 2 years ago? No. That's not going to be happening. That's what we're trying to get rid of. So EMDR, we always go to the first or the worst memory. So there's a lot of prep work that happens. We have to do a lot of data taking. We have to come up with a negative cognition. So the negative cognition is the negative belief I have about myself. Because I was molested, I must be a bad person. People don't love, I'm unlovable because this happened to me. I have this negative belief that bleeds into every aspect of my life. So not only am I moving the memory, we're going to change this into a positive cognition or a positive belief about self. No, I am a lovable person, or I am a good person, regardless of these things that happen to me. The beauty about this is it's a memory, and it's like a TV screen that they're looking at in their mind while you're having them move their eyes back and forth. They can talk about it or they cannot talk about it. So we have some people who are like, I ain't saying nothing, I ain't telling nobody, I ain't telling you ever. And then we're like, cool, you don't have, I don't want to know it, honestly. So we'll just do this. Did you notice a change? Did you not notice a change? Because what we're looking for is the intensity a 10? How intense is the choking feeling around your neck that you can't talk? It's a 10. Okay, we're gonna keep going until it's a 0. Oh, it's a 0 now when you bring up that picture? Great. And then we keep going back to it so that they can look at this picture and not get emotionally charged from that. So then they can talk about it. They can be like, yeah, this is what happened, and you know, or here's what I did. So we have a lot of criminal offenders who have committed some pretty horrific crimes. And so they have a negative cognition about self. This isn't a trauma that happened to them, but in a way it is. They committed a trauma on another person and it bothers them. They have to live with the fact that they killed this kid or whatever. So their negative belief about self is that they're a terrible person, worthless person. So we can do the same thing with them and make it so that they can come to a place of forgiveness of self for themselves. They've done their time. They did what they needed to do. Now let's work on how they feel about themselves. So we use EMDR for everything. We use it for sports. So like, say you're a pitcher and it's a mind game, right? A lot of sports are a mind game. And if I start making errors, then I'm like constantly anxious that I'm going to be making this error. And I'm not going to be able to throw that pitch the way that I need to throw it. So I have a negative belief about self, right? So we're going to have them visualize the perfect pitch with the positive cognition. We're going to set that in memory. There you go. So sports is another place where we can use that.
Is this something that they use in prison?
EMDR?
Yeah.
They can.
Do you think it, I mean, it seems like it'd be a positive thing to use.
Again, the person has to be willing.
Yeah.
So
So are you actually having like non-mental health athletes come see you because they've heard about it, or what's going on with that?
not yet, but we've been doing it on ourselves. Just to see, you know. So there is like there are places that specialize in nothing but like sports medicine who do EMDR. So we have softball team and we have this guy. He's like, well, and we're like, well, just do the EMDR, try that. So we've been doing it and it's been helpful. So we have a lot of like non-mental health situations that are happening in our office, and we're doing it with each other. So that helps.
You know, on this, is it a short-term thing, or it could be lifetime, or is it just, you know?
It is short term. So I did EMDR. I had a lady who had twins, and at maybe 6 months, one of her twins died. And so we did EMDR. She was a school teacher, and every time her phone would ring, she would go into full-on panic attack. Because that's what happened. The phone rang, she was at school, she picked it up, it was her husband, they're on the way to the hospital, and so it's this whole thing. And so her just being in the classroom caused her anxiety and stuff. So we did EMDR, and it probably took us 7 months. A lot of times it can be quicker. Hers was intense. And man, we went through, it's kind of crazy because this is one we did talk about. So we went through every detail of that whole event until the time, even the afterwards, because after it, there was this whole police investigation. Whenever a child dies, police have to investigate. So she felt re-traumatized. You know, now the police are coming and you're going to ask me if I did something wrong to hurt my child. And so we had to go through the time the phone rang to the end, and the police investigation wasn't even over yet. And so it was this ongoing thing. But we would be in an hour session and I always use my hand. They have these light bars and stuff. My arm would be so tired, and I'd be thinking, "Oh my gosh, I hope she could stop right here." You know? But we'd make it from her picking up the phone to not even getting out of the classroom. Every single detail, what she heard, what happened. And so that one was long. It took a long time. But then I've had others where somebody lost somebody in a car crash and they couldn't drive by the crash site, and it happened in like 6 sessions. So it just depends on how fast you can move it.
Could you even use something like that, like, say, like test anxiety or public speaking?
They do that here at the college for test
Do
anxiety.
they really?
Yes.
EMDR?
Yes. Did you guys know that?
No.
It is perfect for test anxiety.
Is it a class or?
No, it's at the counselors do it. They used to. So I think they still do.
I will find out.
So test anxiety, you can do it for addictions, for cravings. You can reduce cravings that way to have a special protocol. You can do it with kids. Just lots of things.
Could they use it for like the suicidal part of it? You know, something that triggers them to want to commit suicide?
Possibly, but I have not looked at that, so I don't know.
Kim, we're gonna be out of
Okay.
time soon, but I wanna make sure some of these others, so no statistics, but in your office, the most common mental health diagnosis. So what population are you working with? Is it the bipolar? Is that the most
Post-traumatic stress.
post-traumatic stress?
Post-traumatic stress is first and then bipolar is second. Naturally, addiction is the number one. But
Which is another question that wasn't on the list, but so when addicts come to your office, historically, it has been because a court of law has forced them to. Do you find the same thing with mental health, or do mental health clients come in on their own more?
they do. There's less stigma attached to mental health than there is addiction. So people are more, so I've done groups that are just mental health groups, and they run much more smoothly than if you have just an addiction group. People are more willing to talk about their mental health than they are about their drug addiction. The funny thing is that the majority of people who come in with a drug addiction have some sort of mental health disorder. So did it happen as a course of being an addict or an alcoholic? Sometimes. Was it there before they became an addict or an alcoholic? Sometimes.
Would you say it's overwhelmingly the majority?
Yes. Overwhelmingly the majority. And sometimes it's just a byproduct of being alcoholic or drug addicted. Like I said, you've changed the brain chemistry. So now that I've changed my brain chemistry, I'm struggling with depression or psychosis because I have altered the way my brain works. So now I have to wait for it to heal. And in that, am I going to treat it with psychotropic medication? Am I not? And so what are those options? And so that's mainly what addictions counseling is walking somebody through that. Here's what to expect. Here's how you can handle it. Here's what's going to happen. Here's some strategies. Ultimately, though, if you are not ready, I can tell you all these strategies all I want. It isn't going to matter because you're going to walk next door to the Giant and get 3 shooters. And then come back to group. You do it all the time. So, and a lot of people, they don't know any other way. And it's like smoking cigarettes, right? Everybody tells you you're going to get cancer, but you're like, yeah, I know. But it's not affecting me now. Right? Right now I'm good. I mean, I got this legal thing, and this DUI really wasn't because I'm an alcoholic. I had a beer with dinner, didn't work out well. These guys next to me in this chair, they're alcoholic. No. So it's that whole thing too, coming to a place of acceptance that, oh, I really do have this and I really need to take care of it. And it's the same thing with mental health. People come in and they don't want to believe that they have depression. And so they'll discount it because they've maybe seen it in their family and they don't like it. So they're going to be like, not me. That's not what that is.
So that was one of the other questions. Do you have people who don't even realize that they have a mental health diagnosis? That would be a true statement.
That's a true statement, and especially for the personality disorders. So the bipolar and the antisocial and the oppositional defiant, they think they're just angry or the borderline personality is the worst. It looks like bipolar. It looks like a whole bunch of things, but they just think it's their worldview. This is how the world is, and this is how I am in the world, and so what's wrong with that? Nothing wrong with that.
So if substance abuse is going hand in hand with mental health diagnosis, would you say that that is generally linked with deviant behavior, criminality?
Almost always. So we have the federal probation parole contract and the New Mexico Corrections Department contract. So we get all of those clients. Nobody committed their crime. If it is, it's like 0.5%. That wasn't either under the influence or there was a serious mental health condition that happened, had during the time. Hardly ever do you have like somebody just go commit a serious crime. I know it happens, but it's rare. Very rare.
Greatest contributing factor to suicide and poverty? Socioeconomic? Or hereditary? Toss-up?
Toss-up. Hereditary is definitely in there. Because I have people who come from very prominent families who want to come in the back door because they don't want to be seen because of who they are. So it's not socioeconomic in that sense, and they are more dysfunctional and distraught than the average Joe. So it doesn't matter how much money you have or, you know, what it looks like on the outside to the community, or, you know what I mean? So more times than not, it's socioeconomic, and a lot of times it's just organic. This is their chemistry.
Another question was about schizophrenics who can't sleep. I've seen this with other mental health diagnoses. Is it generally they can't sleep because of the medication? They can't sleep because they're not taking their medication? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Probably both. Medication causes a lot of problems, so there are tons of side effects. But the biggest reason is the racing mind, the voices. You know, there's way too much going on up there to be able to find rest or meditation. That's why we teach meditation, to learn how to try to slow that down. But usually schizophrenia, even with that, it's not effective.
You were talking about every 55 minutes going out and having a new client, getting a new client. So is group counseling for mental health not appropriate?
No, it is.
It is.
It is. Yeah, and it's good. A lot of times they trigger each other though. And so you can end up with total chaos if you're not really skilled on how to allow the flow of what's coming out of someone. You know? And how far to let it go before you reel it back in. No, group is good, because then for people who don't want to, or they feel that stigma and they don't want to talk, then they can go, oh, this is kind of a normal thing. We have a co-occurring group that we do once a week, and we used to have a mental health group, but the mental health group always falls apart. It's like it'll go good, and then people with chronic mental illness have a hard time keeping their appointments. It's just the way it is. And the co-occurring group are for people with addiction and a serious mental health. So we have 2 counselors that run that group, just to help keep it in line. No, group is good for mental health. That DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is usually done in group, and psychosocial rehab for mental health is done in a
Okay, guys, I tried to go through as many of these questions that weren't answered, and pick out what was important to me. Anything on this list?
Sorry, Haley. Do you see a lot of your adolescents come back?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. We see a lot of everybody come back. Multiple times.
Would you say that adolescents come back court ordered? Or
Yes. Well,
on their own?
mostly court ordered, but we do have them come back on their own. We have generational. We have the child, parent, grandparent, all on probation at the same time. That kind of thing.
Any last? Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, so did you say, that in New Mexico, like, you can't commit people? Or, okay, so.
You can. It takes 2 medical doctors to agree to commit, and so then trying to find it, when you're needing to get someone committed, it's usually a crisis, and trying to get a medical professional to do that, it's hard. And so a lot of times people want to hole up in their house, and even if the police go over and you're unwilling to, I don't want to talk to you and I don't want to go anywhere, they can't force you to. So unless they feel like there's an imminent threat to the community. But, yeah.
For themselves?
Or themselves, the police?
Imminent threat to self and others, or mostly others?
I can't answer that. I don't know. Because I don't know how they determine. I think it's others. You can pretty much stay in your house and do it in if you want to. There's a lot of those you just don't hear about.
On that note,
Right.
thanks, Kim.
All right. Thank you.